Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today at the South-Y Child Care Centre for a very important announcement for Manitoba families. My name is Cordella Friesen. I am very proud to be the President and CEO of the YMCA of Winnipeg, Manitoba's largest child care provider, and it's a privilege to kick off today's event. A special welcome to our dignitaries today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Premier Heather Stephenson, the Honourable Dan Vandel, Minister responsible for Prairie's Economic Development Canada, Canadian Northern Economic Development Agency, and Minister for Northern Affairs. And the you have a lot of work. And the Honourable Wayne Wasco, Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning. Before we begin today, I would like to first acknowledge that we are gathered today on Treaty 1 territory and are located on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, Ojibwe, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Now it's with great pleasure that I welcome Prime Minister Trudeau to the podium for today's announcement.
Thank you, Cordella, for the introduction, and thanks for welcoming us, along with Alana and all your incredible staff here at the YMCA for your support. I'm happy to be here with Dan, with Kevin and Terry, who are all strong voices from Manitoba and across the country. Good to see Premier Stephenson. Always nice to make announcements with you, Heather, and Provincial Minister Wasco and other colleagues. Today is a great reminder of what we can do when we all work together to deliver for families and for folks in Manitoba and across the country. I just spent 2 weeks doing different town halls with Canadians across the country. I met with nurses, workers, PSWs, students, farmers, among others. I listened to them and answered a few questions. And obviously, one of the things that keeps coming back for Canadians across the country is concerns about the rising cost of living. Avec la pandémie et avec l'invasion de la Russie en Ukraine, on a vu une accélération de la hausse du coût de la vie. Beaucoup de familles ont de la difficulté à payer leurs factures. C'est pour ça qu'on a pris des mesures pour aider les gens qui en ont le plus besoin. We doubled the GST credit for 6 months for roughly 11 million households. Eligible couples with 2 kids got up to an extra $467 back in their pockets, and eligible seniors got about $225 on average. We're fighting climate change with a price on pollution that is giving back more money than most people pay. A family of 4 here in Manitoba will get over $1,000 back this coming fiscal year through climate action incentive payments. We enhanced the Canada Workers Benefit, which means workers can receive up to $1,200 more this year. We're delivering payments of an extra $500 for people who are struggling with the cost of rent. We launched the Canada Dental Benefit that has helped more than 220,000 kids whose families couldn't afford to send them to the dentist go to the dentist so far. And of course, we're continuing our work to make child care more affordable right across the country, including here in Manitoba. Today, we're here together to announce that Manitoba will achieve an average of $10 a day for regulated child care in a few weeks on April 2nd, 3 years ahead of schedule. We just met with a number of parents here at the YMCA. For example, Brenda and Peter told me they're now saving hundreds of dollars a month, which are savings that can be used for groceries, other bills, or after-school activities, and it's making a real difference in their lives. This is part of our plan to make life more affordable for the middle class and for people working hard to join it. It's part of our plan to build an economy that works for all Canadians. Les parents, et en particulier les mères, ne devraient pas avoir à choisir entre leur famille et leur carrière. Quand les garderies sont plus abordables, c'est bon pour les familles et c'est aussi bon pour l'économie, parce que ça permet à plus de parents de faire partie du marché du travail. We're keeping our promise to make childcare more affordable. Today's announcement for $10 a day childcare in Manitoba comes less than 2 years after we reached an agreement with the province. And of course, all of this work wouldn't be possible without the advocacy and leadership of the childcare sector. So to all the experts, educators, providers, and families who've been tireless in advocating for better childcare for years, indeed for decades, thank you for your continued work. As you know, we have agreements with all provinces and territories to make childcare more affordable for families. We're seeing results here in Manitoba and across the country. Families in nearly half of provinces and territories are now benefiting from an average of $10 a day or less. That includes both Quebec and the Yukon, who have led the country in delivering affordable childcare. And fees have been cut in half in all other provinces and territories, with work on track to deliver $10 a day childcare everywhere across the country by March 2026. But now in April in Manitoba. On continue notre travail pour rendre la vie plus abordable. En étant là pour soutenir la classe moyenne et ceux qui travaillent fort pour s'y joindre, on bâtit une économie centrée sur le bien-être de tous les gens au Manitoba et de tous les Canadiens. Merci beaucoup d'être ici. I'm now very happy to pass it over to Premier Stephenson. Heather.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. It's just an incredible honor to be here. Cordella, thank you for hosting us here today. To all of your staff and volunteers at the YMYWCA, it's just such an honor to be here with all of you. Thank you for opening your doors, not just to us, but those families that we just met and all those other families that you really cover off for daycare here. And we just thank you so much. Thank you, Prime Minister. It's a pleasure again to have the opportunity to be here with you today. Bienvenue at Winnipeg. We're joined by our colleagues from the federal government as well as my colleagues from the Manitoba legislature. I want to thank them, and particularly our Minister of Education for the work that he's done on this file. We're here at the Y to announce this significant milestone to provide affordable and accessible childcare services for Manitoba families. And as the Prime Minister said, and I'm going to reiterate again, when we work together, we can accomplish great things for our communities, for our province, and for our country. Since I became Premier, I've made it clear that our government is keen to collaborate with all levels of government to improve Manitobans' quality of life and the services they rely on, and that, of course, is what brings us all here today. As a government, we recognize that access to affordable and high-quality childcare is essential for Manitobans to be able to participate in the workforce, support their family, and play an active role in the growth of our communities and our economy. Under the Canada-Manitoba, Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Agreement, our government committed to reaching an average of $10 per day for parent fees by 2026. But today I am proud to announce that with significant initiatives Manitoba has implemented over the past few years, we have gone above and beyond that commitment and have done so 3 years ahead of schedule. Beginning on April 2nd of this year, Manitoba families will pay a maximum of $10 a day based on regular full-time hours in our regulated nonprofit childcare centres for all children age 12 and under. À compter de 2 avril cette année, les familles manitobaines paieront un maximum de $10 par jour pour tous les enfants âgés de 2 ans et moins. And for families most in need, the Child Care Subsidy Program will continue to provide financial support that further reduces fees, ensuring cost is not a barrier to quality early learning programming for those children. As a government, we recognize that many Manitoba families are struggling to make ends meet. This partnership and our significant investments will save Manitoba families thousands of dollars a year in childcare fees. That is money that can go directly towards groceries, paying the bills, or saving for our children's future. Today's announcement supports our government's ongoing efforts to strengthen childcare services for Manitoba families, including creating thousands of new childcare spaces throughout the province and supporting our centres and the dedicated staff who care for our children. Our government is proud to be a national leader in providing affordable and accessible childcare services throughout the province. Notre gouvernement est fier d'être chef de file national dans la prestation de services de garde d'enfants affordables et accessibles dans toute la province. I want to thank the Prime Minister and our federal partners for their support and our ongoing collaboration to strengthen and grow Manitoba's early learning and childcare system here in our province. Today is a great day for the future of children and their families here in Manitoba. And with that, I would like to thank once again the Prime Minister for being here today and just pass the podium over now to Minister Vandal to say a few words.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde et bienvenue à Saint-Vital. Welcome to Saint-Vital. What an exciting day. Welcome, Prime Minister. I'd like to welcome Premier Stephenson, Minister Iwatsko. It's great to see you again, as well as Ministers Squires and Gordon. It's great to meet you, as well as my colleagues, Terry Duguid and Kevin Lamoureux, two of the hardest working members of Parliament, not just for their constituencies, but for Winnipeg and for Manitoba. And I want to acknowledge one of the hardest working councillors in the city of Winnipeg, Brian Mays of St. Vital, a great partner on many initiatives. Today marks a significant milestone, one that is a result of a lot of hard work, not only by Minister Karina Gould and the Prime Minister, but the province of Manitoba and our partners right here in St. Vital, in the St. Vital community. Aujourd'hui marque une étape importante. L'une d'elles est le fruit d'un travail acharné, non seulement de la ministre Karina Gould et du Premier ministre, mais aussi de la province du Manitoba et nos partenaires ici, même dans notre communauté. The YMCA provides so many necessary services for families and individuals, and as many of you know, early in my career, I was a social worker in the city, working in schools, working at the Mamaway Center, and I know of the value of the services that the Y offers, what it means for families, what it means for children, and it's a pleasure to be here, and I thank all of you for the incredible work that you do. We're here today to let families know that we're helping them save thousands of dollars a year on childcare expenses. Less than 2 years after we've signed an agreement with Manitoba to get to that $10 a day childcare, we are going to meet that target well ahead of schedule, which is an absolutely incredible achievement. Nous sommes ici aujourd'hui pour faire savoir aux familles que nous les aidons à économiser des milliers de dollars par année en frais de garde d'enfants. Moins de 2 ans après signer une entente avec le Manitoba pour obtenir des services de garde à 10 piastres par jour, nous allons atteindre cet objectif bien avant la date prévue, qui est une réalisation incroyable. This is what can be achieved through partnership. This is what can be achieved through collaboration and a political will to move forward on a critical economic policy that will directly benefit thousands of families in Manitoba. From the Canada Child Benefit, which has lifted over 400,000 children out of poverty, to a $10 a day childcare, to the dental care benefit for children and new renter supports, kids and their families can continue to count on our government to put them first and ensure we are building a strong economy for everyone across Manitoba. Merci beaucoup. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much. I'd like now to turn the podium over to Minister Iwatsko.
Good morning, everyone, and congratulations, Manitoba. I am pleased to be here today with Prime Minister Trudeau, of course, our Premier, my good friend and colleague for many years now, Premier Heather Stephenson. My colleagues, Minister Squires and Minister Gordon as well, have joined us, and of course, Minister Vandell and MPs Duguid and Lamoureux to join us here for this incredible announcement, basically all about our Manitoba families. I would also like to take this opportunity to echo some of the words that the Prime Minister, Premier, and the Minister has already said as well. The collaboration that we have had with my department, I'd also like to give a big round of applause and thank you for all the hard work of my department officials, some of who are joined us this morning for this announcement. We could not do this without all the hard work behind the scenes as well, and those conversations that are happening at the officials level and also at the federal level as well. I'd like to thank Minister Karina Gould, because I know that we've had many conversations over the last 14 months now, making sure that this comes to reality. I would, of course, like to thank the YMYWCA South Winnipeg branch and Cordella Friesen for hosting us here today and welcoming us here. I know that I've had the pleasure of meeting many of the dedicated staff that takes care of our most precious resources on a day-to-day basis, and those are our children. And so to them, thank you for your considerably hard work each and every day, which is going to definitely pay off for all of us into the future. As we know that we've made a commitment to making childcare more affordable and accessible, and we're making it happen, as it's already been said, but I cannot stress enough, 3 years ahead of schedule. A key part of the $10 a day childcare and the new spaces we've introduced in the last year is having professionals staff the new and affordable spaces. You cannot have any of them without the others. We are focusing on attracting, training, and retaining childcare professionals. That's why our government has issued a joint expression of interest to work with post-secondary institutions to expand training programs for childcare assistants and early childhood educators as well. The goal is to ensure that there are an additional 1,000 childcare assistants and 2,000 early childhood educators to support the plan of creating the additional 23,000 childcare spaces throughout Manitoba by 2026. Post-secondary institutions can apply or have applied to receive funding to develop new on-site childcare spaces or expand existing facilities. The funding will support the development of training expansion as well as learning labs and demonstration sites that will allow students to put their in-class learning into action. The updated training will focus on developing a comprehensive, integrated, and culturally responsive curriculum framework with an emphasis on flexibility and accelerated training options that meet certification standards. The training will also prioritize the needs of Francophone and Indigenous communities in relation to childcare. Access to affordable, conveniently located childcare will ensure Manitoba parents can fully participate in the workforce. This expression of interest and the new childcare professionals will help train and also ensure that Manitoba families can go to work knowing that their children are receiving high quality and inclusive care. I would also like to thank and congratulate, and just basically, again, from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of our government's heart, applaud the MCCA, Manitoba Child Care Association. I know that Jody Kale and Linda are here with us today, and I see Karen is with us as well today, that's now joined the Y. There's been many months of incredible working together and collaborating, making sure that our child care sector is feeling valued. And matter of fact, I have to just repeat something, and forgive me, Prime Minister, to take a few seconds. We were actually in this room announcing the wage grid that was going out to our child care sector. And that's when Minister Gould had joined us. And also at the time, Minister Carr was with us. So Minister Carr was here giving that announcement. So this room brings back some very great memories on that partnership and collaboration. And again, I want to just thank everybody, our federal partners, our child care sector, and of course, helping to support this initiative with the strong leadership and work of our Premier as well, with her collaboration efforts with the Prime Minister. Thank you for coming to Manitoba, sir. Very nice to meet you. And thank you to everybody. Thank you, merci, and miigwech.
We will now begin the question and answer period. Nous allons maintenant commencer avec la période des questions. There will be 20 minutes for questions. I will turn it over to the first question. The first question is from CBC.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Cam McIntosh, CBC National. On China, you've talked about mechanisms that we have in place to guard against foreign interference in our elections. Why not call an inquiry? Why do you think that would be of no utility? What would be the downside of it?
I think it's extremely important that Canadians are taking such an interest and are so concerned about protecting our democracy. We know that China, among other countries, has attempted to interfere not just in our democracy and in our country in general, whether it's institutions or research facilities or political processes. We also know they tried to interfere during our elections in 2019 and 21. The reason we know that is partially because we put in place mechanisms that weren't there before we came into office to empower professional, nonpartisan public servants to monitor closely what's going on. But I absolutely hear that Canadians want to be reassured that independent experts are looking at this issue. They want to make sure that all the right questions are being posed of our intelligence and security agencies in a rigorous way to make sure they're doing everything possible. And they want a level of public accountability from those officials to be talking about everything that needs to be done and everything that continues to be done. All of those goals are related to processes that are ongoing as we speak. For the 2019 election, we created a high-level panel on election interference comprised of Canada's top public servants who are independent and professional and dedicated to this country, and they work closely with all of our national security experts, officials, and agencies to monitor day by day what was going on during the 2019 and 2021 elections. The independence, the professionalism, the rigor with which they looked at it is something that Canadians can take tremendous reassurance in the fact that it was found that our election integrity held absolutely in 2019 and 2021. And further to that, an independent report analyzing the work they did in the 2021 election was just released, laying out all the things that worked, all the things that were effective, and put forward recommendations for how to even improve it in the future, which is absolutely something we will take seriously. So we have the process that we put in place that is professional, independent people working with the public service to make sure thresholds are met. But on top of that, following our election in 2015, we created something that Canada never had before, which is a committee of parliamentarians from all the different parties who would get cleared up to the most top secret clearances so they can look at all the top secret work that our national security agencies are doing, including serious studies they put into election interference and foreign interference in general. So you have political members of parliament from all parties cleared to top secret levels that are and have and will continue to dig into the issue of interference so that people from different partisan perspectives can challenge and push not just the government but the agencies themselves to make sure they did everything and are continuing to do everything to keep Canadians safe. And on top of that, there are right now public hearings, committee meetings in Ottawa where our top security officials, from the National Security Intelligence Advisor to the CSIS Director to the panels of people who were involved in this process, are testifying publicly before parliamentary committee on everything that was done and that needs to be continue to be done and should be done in the future. So all these processes are going on and demonstrate the seriousness with which this government and this country needs to take the question of foreign interference. And as we move forward, as these processes unfold, I'm sure they will highlight more that we need to do, areas we need to do more, and we will be there to do whatever is necessary to meet two goals. First of all, to ensure that our election integrity holds, that our democracy is defended against foreign interference, and second, that Canadians can have confidence in our institutions, in our democracies, in our ability to defend ourselves. These are things that are being undergone right now because, as a government, we have always taken this issue extraordinarily seriously, as Canadians expect us to. Absolument. Je comprends tout à fait et je suis d'accord avec tous les Canadiens qui sont préoccupés par l'intégrité de nos élections, de nos processus démocratiques et l'impact possible de l'ingérence chinoise et d'autres pays dans nos élections et dans nos institutions. C'est quelque chose non seulement que nous partageons aujourd'hui, cette inquiétude avec les Canadiens, mais qui a causé qu'en 2015, on a commencé à travailler pour établir des systèmes et des mécanismes pour protéger notre démocratie et assurer l'intégrité de nos élections. Les gens veulent savoir d'abord de personnes expertes et indépendantes que l'intégrité de nos élections a tenu. Ils veulent savoir que les différents partis politiques vont pouvoir mettre au défi nos systèmes de renseignement pour assurer qu'ils sont en train de faire tout ce qui est nécessaire. Ils veulent aussi voir publiquement ces gens questionner et répondre à des questions précises sur l'ingérence chinoise et comment on est en train de répondre. Or, on a en place actuellement des mécanismes qui font exactement ça. On a mis de l'avant, pour les élections de 2019 et 2021, pour la première fois, un panel de hauts fonctionnaires indépendants, non partisans, professionnels, qui ont accès à tous les renseignements dévoilés et découverts par nos services d'information et de renseignement pour s'assurer au jour le jour, pendant les élections de 2019 et 2021, que l'intégrité de nos élections n'est pas compromise, n'a pas été compromise. Et ces gens-là ont fait leur travail de façon indépendante et il y a eu des rapports indépendants qui examinaient leur travail en 2019 et qui viennent de sortir pour 2021, qui démontrait que le travail avait été bien fait et que les Canadiens peuvent avoir confiance dans l'intégrité de nos élections. Mais en plus de ça, on a créé, suite aux élections de 2015, pour la première fois, un comité de parlementaires, des parlementaires de tous les différents partis qui ont reçu l'approbation nécessaire, les qualifications nécessaires pour regarder tous les documents top secrets, pour travailler directement avec nos services de renseignement, pour s'assurer que nos services de renseignement sont en train de faire tout ce qui est nécessaire, s'assurer que le gouvernement est en train de faire tout ce qui est nécessaire pour protéger l'intégrité de nos élections. Ce comité de parlementaires a regardé attentivement dans les années passées l'ingérence étrangère et va continuer de faire leur travail pour s'assurer de façon multipartisane que le travail se soit fait. Et troisièmement, actuellement, en ce moment-ci, un comité parlementaire, de façon publique, est en train d'entendre les témoignages de nos hauts fonctionnaires en matière de sécurité et de renseignement pour répondre à des questions publiquement que les Canadiens ont, que les différents partis ont en public, pour rassurer les Canadiens que l'intégrité de notre démocratie, de nos élections, tient. Alors, c'est des mécanismes qui sont là pour répondre exactement aux préoccupations et aux questions des Canadiens, mais évidemment, avec ces processus qui vont de l'avant, il va sûrement avoir des enjeux qui vont être soulevés, qui vont dire, où on va dire oui, on devrait faire plus ici, on devrait en faire plus là, et c'est exactement ce qu'on va regarder dans les semaines à venir pour s'assurer de deux choses. D'abord, que le Canada continue de faire tout ce qui est nécessaire pour protéger l'intégrité de nos institutions et de notre démocratie, et deuxièmement, pour s'assurer que les Canadiens sont rassurés que nos institutions et que notre démocratie est bien protégée et continue de fonctionner avec intégrité.
Follow-up question?
Yeah, just to follow up regarding Morris Rosenberg, why pick someone so closely tied to your family's foundation? Would it not inspire more confidence outside of Liberal circles to pick someone else?
The choice of the person to look at this was based on, was done by the professional public service themselves. They wanted someone who had experience working for multiple different governments of different partisan stripes and a long career in the public service. And Mr. Rosenberg certainly qualifies for that. But he was the choice of the professional public service, not of my government.
Next question.
Hi there, my name is Sav Jones. I'm with APTN National News. A First Nations leader has told APTN News that the next commissioner of the RCMP should be an Indigenous person to address systematic racism in the force. What do you think of this?
I think it's an excellent idea. I think seeing more and more Indigenous leadership throughout systems and institutions across the country, we should absolutely look at more diversity. We should absolutely look at bringing forward Indigenous voices to lead those institutions. But just putting an Indigenous voice at the top, and we have a whole independent process going forward, and we will see who ends up being the next chief of the RCMP, the next commissioner of the RCMP. That's a process I'm not going to speak to now, but we will always look to try and make sure the full diversity of Canada and Indigenous representation is part of our considerations. But we have to understand that it's not just about putting the right person at the top of an organization that makes the systemic change necessary. There is a huge amount of work on structures within our institutions, including the RCMP, to ensure that the entire force, the entire system is fully respectful of Indigenous people, respectful of diversity, inclusive in everything it does, and responsive to the real needs on the ground. So yes, we're always looking to make sure that the highest level voices are representative of the fullness of Canada, but we need to also make sure that the systems themselves are transformed. So I look forward to doing the important work of finding out who, figuring out who would be the right leader to be the next commissioner of the RCMP, regardless of their background.
Follow-up?
And just as a follow-up, will you commit to appointing an Indigenous person as the next commissioner for the RCMP, as there are ones that are, you know...
I believe I just answered that question. We're going to commit to a proper, robust process that will find the best possible person to deal with a range of concerns that Canadians are facing, but of course, making sure that reconciliation is at the heart of what we do to improve the RCMP moving forward is going to be a significant factor we take into account.
Thank you.
Prochaine question.
Bonjour, Catherine Moreau de Radio-Canada. Sur la licence d'Adastra Labs qui lui permet en fait de produire de la cocaïne de manière légale, pourquoi est-ce que la Colombie-Britannique n'était pas au courant? Puis est-ce que vous avez l'intention de décriminaliser aussi ailleurs au pays des petites quantités?
J'ai été choqué, tout comme le premier ministre de la Colombie-Britannique, de voir le communiqué de presse de cette compagnie-là. C'est vrai que Santé Canada permet à certaines compagnies pharmaceutiques, pour des besoins de recherche et de besoins médicaux extrêmement limités, l'utilisation de ce produit-là. Mais il y a aucune intention, il n'y a aucune permission de vendre ça sur le marché et de partager ça avec les Canadiens. Ça a été un manque de compréhension, je pense, dans le communiqué de presse et on est en train de rectifier le tir là-dessus parce que c'est pas quelque chose qu'on cautionne en tant que pays.
Est-ce que c'est possible de le dire en anglais aussi pour mes collègues?
I was as surprised as the Premier of British Columbia was to see that a company was talking about selling cocaine on the open market or commercializing it. There are limited and very restricted permissions for certain pharmaceutical companies to use that substance for research purposes and for very specific, narrowly prescribed medical purposes, but it is not a permission to sell it commercially or provide it on an open market. We are working very quickly with this company to correct the misunderstanding that their press release has caused. This is not something that this government is looking at furthering.
Question suivie.
Skylar Peters with Global Winnipeg. When did you first learn about the CSIS allegations concerning Han Dong's alleged involvement with the Chinese election interference network?
As I've said many times, Canadian parliamentarians and indeed Canadians regularly get updates on foreign interference. And as Prime Minister, I am constantly updated with concerns by CSIS, by other security institutions, to make sure we're doing everything we can to keep Canadians safe. And that includes keeping parliamentarians safe. We know that Chinese-Canadian parliamentarians and Chinese-Canadians in general are targets, greater targets for interference by China than others. We know the same goes for Iranian Canadians, who are more subject to interference from the Iranian government. Russian speakers in Canada are more vulnerable to Russian misinformation and disinformation. And we get updated regularly on how we can make sure that our integrity and that the work that Canadians do to serve in politics is done with full protections. Okay. En tant que gouvernement, en tant que Premier ministre, je reçois régulièrement des mises à jour de nos agences de sécurité et de renseignement pour s'assurer qu'on est en train de protéger les Canadiens qui servent leur communauté en tant que politiciens. On reconnaît que les communautés Canadiens de diaspora sont plus vulnérables de l'ingérence par des pays comme la Chine, l'Iran, la Russie ou d'autres. Et c'est pour ça qu'on prend plus de soins pour s'assurer qu'ils sont protégés.
Just for clarity, Prime Minister, were you briefed on Han Dong specifically? And if you weren't, do you believe that you should have that?
Canadians can know that as a Prime Minister and as a government, we regularly get top-secret briefings on how we can best protect Canadians, including Canadians from various diaspora communities who serve as parliamentarians, how we make sure that they are able to do their job of representing their communities without being subject to interference from foreign countries. That's something we will continue to do.
Next question.
Hi, Prime Minister Jeff Keel from CTV Winnipeg. I do have just a quick daycare question.
Thank you. That's a good thing. It's why we're all here today.
When we heard Minister Owasco touch on this, there are a lot of families who are going to say, great, you're making childcare more affordable, but I still can't find a spot. And by the time spots open, my kids will be in high school. What do you say to families in Manitoba and across the country who still can't find a spot?
I'll turn it over to the Premier to follow up on this. But let me say, when we moved forward a couple of years ago as a federal government to say we wanted to make $10 childcare a reality right across the country, and we were going to work with the provinces to do that, we knew that it wasn't enough to just make childcare spaces more affordable. We needed to make sure that they were high quality and that there were more spaces, which is why I was glad to hear Dan highlight the announcement that was made a while ago around a pay grid for early childhood educators to make sure that people know that that's a career that they will be supported in, that they can support a family, that it's valued by society. So increasing the wages for early childhood educators is an important piece of it, as is adding spaces that are high quality and affordable across the system. And I know Manitoba has made significant investments in creating more spaces, and there's more work to do. One of the things that we saw, even as we were drawing on a Quebec model where for years now the average childcare fees in Quebec are $8.50, there's still a lack of spaces. So the money we put forward for childcare in Quebec went towards creating more spaces, and there's continuing to be more work to do. So we are aware that we need to see more spaces created, and we're going to continue to work and encourage Manitoba to create those, work with municipalities to do it, but also make sure that those spaces are where they need to be across the country. More spaces in rural and Indigenous communities. More spaces that are in French for the Francophone communities. Protections of official language minorities are extraordinarily important. These are things that are built into the agreements that we're happy to see Manitoba make significant advances on, and we'll continue to be there to help them do even more. But Premier, happy to turn it to you.
Sure, Jeff, you'll know that we have already announced 23,000 new childcare spaces by 2026. So we recognize there's more work to be done. That's why we're moving in that direction. We will be opening up new childcare centers as well. We have already been moving in that direction. So we recognize that there's more work to be done, and we're continuing to move in that direction.
And my follow-up is not daycare, so don't boo me. And we have an analyst poll out that says, a majority of Canadians are concerned about possible interference from the Chinese government. Do you share their concerns, Mr. President?
Yes. I very much share the concerns of Canadians around interference from the Chinese governments or other foreign governments. And I have shared those concerns all the way back to 2015. When we got elected and realized that even as we were seeing increased election interference around the world, in places like France or the United States or elsewhere, democracies subject to foreign interference, we knew that we had to create mechanisms to respond to that, because Canada had very few, if any, mechanisms to counter interference in our democracies when we took office. That's why we created, and I'm not going to go through the list again, so many different mechanisms designed to do it. We actually even led at the G7 when we hosted in Charlevoix in 2018 the creation of a rapid response mechanism shared by the G7 on foreign interference in our democracies. So not only do I share the preoccupations of Canadians, we have taken action, significant actions, over the past 8 years to increase our ability to do that. But it is an ongoing challenge, not just in politics, in business, in academia and research, and that is why we continue to strengthen our capacity to respond to that, because Canadians need to know that our institutions hold, and Canadians need to be reassured that they will continue to hold into the future. Okay. Oui, je partage les préoccupations des Canadiens par rapport à l'ingérence chinoise, et je la partage depuis 2015. C'est pour ça, d'ailleurs, que ce gouvernement a tellement pris au sérieux la question d'ingérence. Pourquoi on a créé des nouvelles institutions qui n'existaient pas avant ça au Canada, dont le panel de fonctionnaires pour examiner les élections, dont le comité de parlementaires sur les documents classifiés et sur de travail sur l'intelligence et la sécurité, mais aussi, par exemple, qu'on a mené la charge au G7 en 2018 à Charlevoix, où on a créé un mécanisme de réponse rapide du G7 sur l'ingérence étrangère dans nos démocraties. Non seulement je partage ces préoccupations, et ce depuis longtemps, mais nous prenons extrêmement au sérieux cet enjeu, et nous allons continuer de faire tout ce qui est nécessaire pour assurer l'intégrité de notre démocratie.
Last question.
Hello, Prime Minister. Brittany Hobson with the Canadian Press. Just to follow up on Jeff's last question, how can Canadians trust that elections have not been influenced by foreign governments when the information is always protected by national security laws? To add to that, isn't an uninformed public that is not able to trust the democratic processes we have a threat to society, or to national security, sorry?
Pretty sure everything I've said over the past 20 minutes answered that question, but I will do it one more time just for the Canadian press. We put in place strong, independent mechanisms by top public servants who get full access to everything that all of our intelligence and security communities look into and find and monitor on an ongoing basis every day in Canada, particularly during elections. And those top independent public servants who are part of a committee that we created after coming into office, because it didn't exist before, for the 2019 421 elections and ongoing, concluded in an independent and nonpartisan way that despite the existence of ongoing attempts at Chinese interference, that interference did not impact the outcomes of the election in 2019 and 2021. That's not me who's saying it. That's the panel of top public servants who are independent and tasked with exactly that, supported by the work done by our intelligence and security agencies. So Canadians can absolutely be confident in those 2019 and 2021 elections. On top of that, there is an independent report that came out on that work done during the 2019 election, and again that was just released on what happened during the 2021 election, that confirms independently that conclusion that our elections actually held. So Canadians can be confident on that. But further to that, there are ongoing public committee hearings happening right now where those heads of agencies and people responsible for safety and integrity of our elections are testifying publicly on all the work that's being done. And further to that, we created a National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians comprised of parliamentarians from every different party who get top secret clearance so they can dig into all the work that our national security agencies and experts do day in and day out, including and especially during election times, to protect our democracies, to protect our institutions. So Canadians have a lot of different reasons to be confident that indeed the integrity of our elections in 2019 and 2021 held, and that on an ongoing basis, the government will continue to strengthen our capacity to counter those attempts at foreign interference that come from China, from Russia, from Iran, from other countries that are looking to destabilize and throw chaos into our democracies.
Quick follow-up.
Thank you. This might be another reiteration, but why hasn't
Well, you can ask me a fresh question then that you can come up with.
Why hasn't Canada updated its national security policy since 2004?
We have absolutely updated Canada's national security policies many times over the past years, including with, for example, the creation of oversight bodies, a strengthening of NCIRA, a creation of NCIRA, which is a oversight and oversight body over our national security agencies. The NSICOP, the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, that is tasked to do exactly that, that we created over the objections of the Conservative Party that didn't think empowering politicians to have top secret clearances to look into these issues was needed or necessary. Thank God we did, because we now have a committee of parliamentarians that can lean in, and we will continue to update and make sure that all the tools that are needed by our intelligence agencies and security officials and all the tools needed for proper oversight and accountability of them continues to update it. So we will continue to do the work of empowering our institutions to protect not just our institutions, but our democracy.
Ceci conclut notre conférence de presse. This is the end of our press conference. Thank you to all the participants.